Hey there, welcome to Wiserfy Live. So this is the first episode of Wiserfy Live. Wiserfy Live is basically going to be a daily show here where I'm going to talk to you, our online educators, students, people who are interested in teaching online courses, basically discussing topics around online education, around education in general, around everything that is Wiserfy. So various courses that will be on the platform, various courses that you'll be teaching on the platform, as well interviews with people just like yourself, experts in various fields, talking about what it is that what their message is. Maybe who their audience is. Maybe talking to them a little bit about their experiences. And basically, it's a daily show here on Wiserfy on the Teaching Online Courses platform. Basically for me to showcase or a platform for me to showcase you as the instructors and to basically paint the picture or the vision of what Wiserfy is as a social learning network. Essentially, taking the social learning component and the social network components and combining them together to create a social learning network whereby, we can learn from one another. So today, the topic that I've picked is a rather all-encompassing, or I would think a rather broad topic, and that is of education itself. So today the topic we're going to discuss is education, and I don't want to bore everyone and go into a huge, historical around education. But obviously, I would say it's safe to say that at this point everyone's fairly familiar with the current education system in various countries, whether it's Canada, US, Europe, throughout the world, in sort of the developed nations, Australia, into Asia. The educational system, I think in 2000, there was a dedication through UNESCO and through other foundations that wanted that to have basically mandatory primary education. So everyone understands the importance of a foundation of education in the growth of society, in the growth of economics, from a just a self-development perspective, just from a human nature perspective, development, the need of a primary education is extremely important for that foundation, whether it's math, language, literature, so literacy, looking at history and historical and sort of lessons learned. So those are definitely key concepts that are taught in the primary education system, where I think there's a lot of discrepancy and a lot of variation, and there's alternative forms of education start to arise, definitely in the primary, but more so in the secondary education, and then the post-secondary education, which where a lot of the discussion nowadays is around the obviously the importance of primary education and somewhat of secondary education, but maybe the perceived value of a higher education or post-secondary education is brought into question because a lot of people look at why am I going to university or college, or why am I studying to try to get this degree when in essence it's not going to provide me with the skills or the necessary skills essentially that you need to get a job, or those skills in this changes constant world that we live in today, where everything is all about change, and if you're not keeping up, you're being left behind. If that's the case, then what is it that we need to do to change that model so that not only can we provide the foundation, which I think the true purpose, maybe in my opinion at least, if you boil down the entire education system, not only from a foundational standpoint, but is learning how to learn. And that is a key component of the entire education system, is creating people who have the ability to learn, and who have the the skills to continue to learn, and have the desire to continue to learn and to advance their knowledge. And that's where education comes into play. And if you look at higher education or universities, colleges, or post-secondary education, the current way of doing things maybe is slightly outdated in that it's very focused on a specific field of study, and that field of study may not be as appropriate in the workforce as some other more relevant or newer fields of study. And those often are what now would be termed in the continuing education or lifelong learning, where people need to be able to, they understand how to learn, they need to be able to pursue lifelong learning in order to, once they've achieved that foundation of education, they have, they're literate, they can read, write, they have the ability to understand, they have some context, and that's important, some context of, what's happened. So history, sociology, you look at some of the, the social sciences, they provide context so that we can understand, potentially where our place is in Earth. Obviously you've got the sciences, biology, anatomy, physics. I guess physics is more of a math science, but you've got, those are the foundations where you can then start to understand and further advance those fields of study. But a lot of people, I was watching a video, actually I was watching commentary on a video a week or so ago, where the video was a major news channel in the U.S. discussing the value of higher education or of university or college degrees, post-secondary education, and was questioning the value of a degree, whether you should go out, and their argument was obviously increased costs. And reduced perceived value, made a higher or post-secondary education, not worth the costs. And they were, there was discussion around whether someone should hire somebody who didn't have an education, and the perceived values maybe of that person would be higher because they would work harder, and they wouldn't be sort of that, I would say, disgruntled post-secondary student that everyone sort of has the perception of. But I think one argument is flawed there, and that is of the post-secondary education student questioning whether they should be working in a factory for minimum wage versus the person maybe perceived to have a lower education. Isn't necessarily that they're disgruntled or their values differ. It's more that they're able to question, the need for something, or they have the ability or the inquisitive mind to question the status quo. And that's one thing that I think was sort of some flawed logic in people's perception of what higher education actually is. It is that path to try to open up and allow people who are pursuing that or have the pursuit of education or higher learning to question everything, to question the status quo, and to question, the way things were, the way things are, and the way things are going. And that sometimes, is counter to the sort of establishment, and that is where a lot of people start to question the value of this sort of everyone sort of talks about professors being on a pillar, and the ability for them to teach or preach something that maybe they don't have real world experience in, and that may be true in a lot of instances, but it's that ability to question and engage and understand through experience that really forms an education. But I think where a lot of people, and this is, I guess, the point of this whole sort of rant here, is that education never stops, or learning. I think the key here is learning should never stop, and that the pursuit of lifelong learning should be in everyone. And it's the ability for society to build that foundation through your typical primary education, so you're sort of kindergarten to call it grade 8, and then you've got your secondary education, which is more high school or your adolescent years, so ages say 12 to 16 or 18, where you're going through sort of grades 9 through 12, and that is again, there's some variance in the learning there. I think where a lot of people fail to realize is that post-secondary education, while it is important, a lot of people I think misinterpret why it's important, and the value that it does bring. And a lot of times, and if you talk to a lot of people who have pursued post-secondary education, I think, I don't know the exact stats, but 90+% I would say don't practice a profession based on what their actual post-secondary education was, or aren't in the field of study that they pursued and have gone on to another profession in another field. And the reason for that is, I think, as and this is probably another conversation for another video, is around choice and the lack of perceived choice and the lack of understanding of the various choices. So the lack of understanding, should I, become a doctor or a lawyer, or should I look at, engineering or computer sciences, or should I get into the sciences? Maybe it's health related, maybe it's, chemistry, or should I start to look at business or finance, investments? And I think a lot of people are somewhat overwhelmed, and the ability to choose multiple choices and to start down the paths of multiple ventures or multiple adventures or multiple learning paths is not provided, and so they're forced at a young age to choose one path, and as mentioned, that path for the majority of people is often not necessarily the wrong path, but there are definitely other paths that maybe they would have preferred to have taken had they been given that opportunity. So I think what ends up happening is people choose the wrong path, they feel like they're stuck in that wrong path, and then they fear change and trying to get out of that path. And this is where, again, tomorrow I'm going to talk a little bit about lifelong learning, but this is where lifelong learning comes in, and something like Wiserfy at its current form comes in, where we can create that broadness of choice through the various courses that someone like you will teach, through the various courses from all the different instructors that are teaching based on their experience, based on their expertise, based on their understanding as it currently is of a certain field of study, whether that is something as as sort of traditional as a science or a language or whatever that is, or something is very relevant, maybe around something as minute as marketing automation or email, or something along the lines of languages, or critical video production, let's say. So there's very specific skills that can be taught, that can be passed on, and I think that's key in the continuation of lifelong learning, and in the education of ourselves. One of the studies I looked at when sort of thinking about education said that 70% of all learning will come through self-presented or self-chosen learning. And so it's in ourselves to decide what it is we want to learn, and to the education that we want to have, and how to educate ourselves, and to continue that lifelong learning. So learning how to learn. So anyways, don't want to keep rambling. I probably ramble all the time. So today we're talking a little bit about education. It's Wiserfy Live. If you are an educator, if you are an expert, if you are, on this Wiserfy, basically you're in Wiserfy 101, creating online courses, or you're right here on the Facebook page, Facebook Teaching Online Courses Free Workshop, or Teaching Online Courses, on Wiserfy Free Workshop, and you would like to be on Wiserfy Live, if you have an interesting take on whether it's education, on whatever it is that you're an expert on, and you'd like to share it with our ever-growing audience, I'd encourage you to hit us up at learn@wiserfy.com. I can definitely have you on here on the show. We'll talk a little bit about, each day I'll come up with different topics and I'll present them out to you. I'd love to hear your feedback. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your thoughts are on the current education system, primarily around, post-secondary and continuation or continuous learning, or continuous education, and what your thoughts are on Wiserfy as a whole, maybe some ideas of how we can continually improve our platform so we can try to bring you the best and most relevant educational content and skill sharing and learning experience right to your home, where you are, the comforts of your home. So, thanks again for joining me here on Wiserfy Live. My name is Justin Fox, founder and CEO of Wiserfy. I will see you again tomorrow. This is a daily show. It's Wiserfy Live right here on Wiserfy. So have yourselves a great day, and I'll see you again tomorrow.